appropriate, say, for a number of reasons. The most common one that I see is connected to age, okay? So young learner materials. There is nothing worse than giving a child of 10 materials in which there are pictures and images of children who are 5 or 6, because the 10-year-olds will think, who are these babies? Who are these little kids? And they don't like it, okay? Research has shown this. So we should always consider the end user, who are the students, and how can we make our content appropriate to them? And we'll have our own values as well. We might decide not to show certain things, or we might decide that in certain contexts we can talk about certain things. Again, this is entirely up to you. Copyright is a big one, and this could be a talk all on its own. And we need to model ethical behavior. We are teachers, and so we need to be correct in our behavior, and we should therefore be very conscious of sharing materials that infringe copyright. So what I'm talking about there, especially with images. So if we use an image, we can't just take any image from the internet and use it. We need to have permission, or we need to find an image that is free to use. And we can find out more about how to do this by looking online or reading up on it a little bit. And another common error is with instructions. So when we write instructions, we might know exactly what we want our students to do. Well, we will know exactly what we want our students to do, but we might not be very clear. So the instructions might be too long or a little bit wordy. And the last one is page design. There's a temptation sometimes to put too much on the page and make it crowded, fussy. And this can have an effect, especially on those learners who might be neurodiverse, or they might have dyslexia, this kind of thing, where a clean page design with plenty of white space is much more inviting and easier to navigate. So better to have 2 pages than crowd it all into one. So I'm going to have a quick summary of what I've just said with a kind of checklist that you could use or borrow if you like. So let's go through a few of these things. So with trends, I think the main thing to keep in mind is to ask yourself all the time, how will learners access the materials? And then ask yourself, how many versions do you need? So it's easy to make 2 or 3 versions when you've already made one. So you can make a version for a PowerPoint, for slides, a version for print. You can also make versions, of course, for differentiation, where you have extra things and fewer things, okay? Then with principles, you should, before you start writing, you should choose some universal principles that you think are important. And then you should choose some context-driven principles. So for my students in this particular context, it's important that the materials are Yeah, so maybe they need to be aligned to a certain exam, or they might need to be include lots of pronunciation practice. You decide this. And then for the level, use a language profiler. I put one there that I tend to use. It's called Vocab Kitchen, but there are others. And if you do a search on the internet, you'll find others. And then there are these things: inconsistencies in your materials, inappropriate content, copyright, instructions, and page design. And the best advice that I can give you for making sure that you eliminate all of these errors is by always getting a second pair of eyes. So here what I mean is obviously show your materials to someone else. And I would say to everybody, if you are creating materials for your classes, before you go into class or go online with an online class, you should always let somebody else look at your materials, because even if you're very experienced and you've been creating materials and teaching for decades, somebody is a friend, a colleague, somebody who might be doing the same or similar things. So another teacher, somebody working in a similar context where you can proofread and look at each other's materials and give each other some honest feedback and advice. Okay, I've gone through these slides very, very quickly because I'm aware of the time. And so I'm going to say a big thank you, but I will see if we've got any time. Perhaps one of the moderators will tell me. I don't know if we've got any time for any questions and answers. I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can come back into the Zoom room just like one of you. Okay, so please, if anybody's got any questions at all, I don't know what you normally do. Do you write them in the chat box or you might want to ask on the microphone? I'm going to open the chat box here.
Yeah. Right.
And see if there are any questions. Please ask me about anything that connected to materials rights and anything I've said, or anything else that occurs to you that I might be able to answer.
Yeah, thank you. Well, everyone, Catherine has just described 3 things in mind. The first one is she has described changing trends in ELT creating materials. And the second one is principles of creating ELT materials. And the third ELT materials that we can learn from. So if anyone from the floors would like to ask questions, but then we also have chat box here if you'd like to write questions directly to Catherine, please.
Don't be shy.